And you've been waiting now for over an hour for this. So talk about patience. It's you.
And yet, patience is not our topic today. It's power, but I can link it to power,
Well, I'm sure we can
isn't
we
it?
can link anything. I know we have the capacity, you and I, to make something interweave somehow. But yeah, I apologize for that. It doesn't even cross my mind that other people in the world do not abide by daylight savings time. So yeah, it didn't cross my mind to like flag it.
And you know what, though? Uh, Somewhere in the depths of my energy, I knew it because my post yesterday to remind people that we're on Facebook Live today literally says another Facebook Live with Ian, only 24 hours away. Now, every other time I have put that up, I have put the actual time that it'll be on in Brisbane. And yesterday I didn't.
Huh.
So there was something in me that knew that I didn't need to put the actual time. It
Because you
was
couldn't technically quote it because you didn't know. Yeah. Oops.
so I find that actually really I see I see that as a bit of an empowerment. Now I didn't consciously make that happen, but there's empowerment in me that just went, well, if you just put that, then you'll be okay.
It won't matter if we're late
That's right.
by an hour.
And it won't matter. And so therefore it seriously didn't matter when, yes, an hour ago I logged into your Zoom account and it was sitting there waiting. And when it got to right on the hour, I went, no, nah, I think I've got time zone wrong. And so immediately I checked it and it was like, okay, so yeah, I'll just go and do something else for another 3/4 of an hour before I come back on. And it really didn't faze me at all. And so I think that it's a really lovely representation of, I mean, yes, I nominated the topic of power, not for this example.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering because when I interpret power, I think of control. So, do I have
Ah,
control over the situation? What can I do to control this situation so that it works out the way I want it to, or have my kids, behave or whatever? So I don't know if that's what this is about because you're the one who said, "Let's talk about power," and I'm like, I don't know what that is, but let's do it.
well, I think your definition of power is one of those, is a really common immediate assumption of power. When what I've learned is real power sits in the ability to continually let go of what changes around us.
Hmm.
Because that's the bit that we can control. So the assumption of controlling what we can is still there, but it's a little softer and it's a little more subtle and it goes beyond our outside circumstances. And so here we go. One of the reasons that I wanted to introduce power today is that here in Australia and specifically here in Queensland, we've had some announcements this week that have seemed to have triggered some power struggles
Hmm.
within the community, within the individuals, within a
I
whole
don't.
lot of
I don't think
areas.
this is isolated to where you guys are at.
No, I get that it's not isolated yet. It's a something that's been announced this week here in Queensland that has brought it really, it's just really highlighted it.
To the
And
forefront.
so,
So enlighten me, enlighten us.
well, it was announced this week that the whole conversation, which I don't want to go too far into opinions on this specifically, but the vaccinated, non-vaccinated, and the rules and restrictions around those two categories.
Yeah.
And I know because I have a lot of people who I chat to internationally, e.g. you, I know that this is not Australia only. It is
Yeah.
not Queensland only. It is happening everywhere.
Yeah.
But Queensland this week announced what its restrictions will be. And
Okay.
essentially, it's, yeah, there's a whole lot of detail, but essentially it means that if you've chosen not to be vaccinated, then you pretty much live in lockdown rules.
Oh,
And if you
okay.
are vaccinated, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, free reign.
Yep. So that's the that's the distinction, very generalized, but that very much feels what the distinction is. So that's been the highlight trigger.
Weave this into power, because I assume this is what this is about.
Well, there was just a whole lot of conversation around people are having power strain. I'm able to choose. I feel overpowered by what restrictions have been placed on me. Now, I'm not saying this about me because I don't feel that, but I'm observing what conversations need to be actually being brought to the surface.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of this overpowered feel. I don't have choice anymore. What choices have really been left open to me? And when that overpowered feel kicks in, everything feels like it just seems to go into a defeatist approach.
Well, that comes from but that always comes from the lack mindset. So looking at the glass half empty as opposed to half full, and really, I don't think it's really even that. I think we focus on the minutia, the small details of a much bigger picture. But when we focus on those things, it can feel like it's the whole picture.
Yes, because we look at what does that mean today and tomorrow, and that's going to make me feel like this, and it's very much about the we mentality. And yeah, it really comes down to these little micro things. And when we line up all of the little micros, it feels very overwhelming.
It can, yeah.
And there's been a lot of conversation around, well, where is our power then? What do we have power in if all of our lifestyle, because then what happens is all the micro gets highlighted and then it goes into generalization. Well, that changes my lifestyle choices. Yeah,
I mean, I think we are in unique situations because I'm making an assumption here as well. So when I'm working with people, they have a very different mindset on their situation. And I don't ever have to walk a mile in their shoes. So what I try to do is try to give them alternate perspective so that they can see their situation from a different vantage point, so they can make decisions for themselves, because it's their life. And I can't say what's right or wrong for any individual, but I can help them get clarity on what's right for them now, and what choices do they have, and how can they, step into their power in this situation and do something for themselves that works for them.
Yeah, without the compromise, because that then brings back in the power, doesn't it? It brings in that empowered feel that, oh, well, I'm now not compromised, so I can now choose what works well for me with all things considered. So if there's values that are being, if somebody's choosing not to get vaccinated, then they don't. Some of the points that get made around that is not having, not putting foreign things in the system because we don't know what it creates and all those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the arguments. And I think that there's still choices based even and keeping that intact without feeling like the world has collapsed around us.
Yeah.
And I've just found that power, as soon as we feel that someone else or a government or outside circumstances have stripped us of our power, we're simply walking into a blame game. So we blame all these things outside of ourselves, and immediately we do that, we don't have power. So I was thinking of a story I could share about what I noticed in my empowerment this week.
Sure, go for it.
So I went to a real live event. Oh, it was so exciting! Walk into a real room with
humans.
With humans, it was amazing. What was even more special is that we didn't have to wear masks. That was even more fun.
Wow. Faces,
Anyway,
smiles.
it was real face. It was amazing. Anyway, so I was going to this event. Now I do go to another event monthly, but I missed the last month. So it's been about 6 weeks since I've been out to any kind of event. And this particular one, I knew the person that was organising it, but I was walking in that room not knowing anybody else. Now, 10 years ago, that would have been really, really scary for me, and I actually wouldn't have done it. I would have made sure I knew someone that was going, or I would have taken someone with me. And because walking into a room like that can feel it can feel scary.
Absolutely.
And then, and that of course chips away at our empowerment and what we feel powerful about. But I noticed that I was quite happy going along to this thing, not really knowing even who the speaker, well, I'd seen who the speakers were, but I didn't really know them. I knew one of them, I'd met one of them prior, but didn't really get a good, connection in with them. So I didn't really know what I was in for, but I walked in anyway, and I got there early, which is allowed me to feel a bit more comfortable and confident, because then I could sort of see who else was walking in rather than walking into a big crowd.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And so I got there early and I found a seat, and I was just sitting there on my own, and I felt actually really comfortable. Now, I'm not one to do in my own skin on my own all the time very well. It's not something I choose. I prefer to be around other people. I like the company of others. But I was actually really comfortable just sitting and taking in. And I think it was part of the taking in the fact that there were real people in the room and we weren't wearing masks and you could see people's faces and that sort of thing. And then I'd sat there for about 15 minutes and this person spotted me. Now I didn't immediately recognize them, but they were making a beeline together, but you were on the same call as me.
Oh, cool.
And I went, what are the chances? There were 12 people on that call 7 hours earlier. And now I'm in the same live event with one of those people. Anyway, but I looked at that and I went, I was just in my power that day. I was just feeling confident and comfortable. And how lovely that I got somebody that just went, oh, there's Chris. So I must have been sharing outwardly an energy of confidence and energy of comfortableness, and they felt comfortable coming over to me immediately.
Well, I mean, I think you give up that energy anyways, regardless of the space that you're in, right? So, and there's always a beacon on top of your head that we know where you are, right? So that's helpful. But what I'm taking from that is what you had control over was you showing up early, right? So that you could get situated, feel comfortable, get into a good place instead of walking into a swarm. And then just sitting there and noticing and being grateful for maskless interactions, real faces, humans. Like it's like you decided to focus on things that were working as opposed to the small stuff that was not.
Yes, like sitting there on my own and having no friends.
Yeah. And then in doing that, you become this beacon.
Yeah.
Because you're the person who has a little more confidence than you had maybe before you left and before you showed up. So your being will kind of radiate kind of out from you anyways, and you will attract in kind of what you are looking for. So if you're the opposite of that and you go in there with all kinds of angst and worry and whatever, you're probably going to end up next to the other lunatic.
Yes, absolutely. And we forget the power that we have to choose where we find ourselves or choose how we show up where we find ourselves. And it can be such a subtle change in the way that we think about something. And I've just noted, I just thought it was really timely to talk about how we can just change the tiniest things to allow us to feel that we do have the power and see it reflected back.
Mm.
And so that's really what I wanted to share about, you know, the subtlety of power, because sometimes power is seen as this massive thing. Is it attainable? Do we have the power to move forward and evolve, and all these sort of big picture things? And I think whether we engage in power, whether it's through physicality or power of the mind or power of the emotions, if we can just engage in some kind of power through any of those areas, we can actually allow it to spread everywhere.
For sure. And I think you're going to constantly get feedback from your environment, whether you are pushing against it or if you're going with the flow with it. So if you're anxious and nervous, you're probably going to attract in some anxious, nervous energy from elsewhere. So,
or a circumstance that feeds that, and
right.
And
so if you can pull yourself back from time to time and go, okay, how am I showing up and what's surrounding me? Okay, maybe I need to change something inside of me right now on how I'm being, whether that's trying to relax or breathe or, you know, shift areas of the room so that you get a different perspective physically. You don't have to stay in that discomfort.
Yes. And later on that evening, I was having a conversation with one of the people that just appeared. Sort of, there were nibblies at the end of it. And so everyone was sort of standing around and having a chat, and somebody came up and she was very excited and very enthusiastic to be there. And that was lovely. But it was one of those people that I was looking for an exit.
She's watching tonight.
Unlikely. So I was like looking for an exit. Now, previously, let's say even up to 3 years ago, I would just go, oh, I need to go and get some food. I'll just go and do that. But instead, I stood there and I actually showed some vulnerability, because there was actually someone else in the room that I needed to go and meet. I just knew I had to meet them. And I was guessing. I went, oh, I think that's Louisa from B1G1. I think that's who she is. I need to go and meet her, right? And so this person was being all enthusiastic and all about them, and it was making me really sort of a little bit like, oh, seriously, can I escape this? And so what I did is I just went, oh, it's so good to be able to chat to you. I said, I've actually got to go and talk to someone else, and I've really got to get the courage up to, and I almost fed off a little bit of her enthusiasm. Even though it had kind of rubbed me up the wrong way a little. I went, you know what? I could take a little bit of her courage and a little bit of her enthusiasm, even though it feels a bit misdirected, and actually use that to help me go and meet someone. Go, hi, I think you're Louisa. Are you Louisa? I need to come and meet you. And it was like, well, there was a different way to use power.
Yeah. I mean, there's often catalysts to our decision making. So you were in the contrast between when you showed up and when you were, you know, feeling kind of okay with things, and then something showed up that was maybe rubbing you like sandpaper a little bit. Like, I don't think I need to be around this right now. I think I need something a little softer. I think I'm going to head over there. So you're just kind of following your power compass, you know, like what feels good right now versus what doesn't feel good, and then making the shift towards a better feeling destination.
Yeah. And is that, I mean, that's beautifully said. You know, that could almost be the definition of power.
Well, the thing is, you have the ability to make a shift at any time. You are literally one step away from going the direction you want to. It might not be as fast as you want to go, but I'm going in this direction. It does not feel good. Okay, I'm going to turn around. I'm going to go 180 and I'm going to go the other direction and see what it brings me.
Yeah. And I think we forget well, what I've seen this week is that people have forgotten that they have that choice, that they can, not everything's going to feel super comfortable, but we can use that and find the comfortable, find where we can make comfortable.
And I think that's why this kind of time that we're living in, where government is really stepping on people's toes, whether you like it or not, they're trying to use their power. And I think, honestly, I think they're trying to do the best that they can with what they have. And governments are very risk adverse entities to begin with. So they're doing, okay, this is what we think is safe, but we're going to mandate it to everybody. And I don't think, some people are fine with it, others are not. But you always have a choice on how you're going to manage your own personal version of that.
Yeah,
it doesn't have completely to be black and white as it's laid out. Like, it can be a little more gray. But you have to do the analysis of your space and see how can you show up in that space that doesn't get you in a lot of trouble, and you have choices.
Yeah, and if we stay in the blame, oh, it's this circumstance that's creating this for me, poor me kind of feel, we've got to get beyond that to find those moments of, and I saw a beautiful thing happen. Someone on Facebook who has been quite strong in their feelings about their circumstances being restricted. Yeah. And, in all honesty, 99.999% of my life is going exceptionally well. And I love that.
Well, goody for you for the extra 2.9%. No,
I can't find anything at the moment. I can't find anything at the moment that's just out, but I like to have it slightly out, because then there's work in progress. There's still more to do. But I love that there's this subtlety of empowerment that just allows, even in the lovely example this morning of time zone conversion not quite being on point from my end this morning, your evening, and yet there was no sandpaper rub. There was nothing in that went, oh, well, am I supposed, have I done it wrong, or why wasn't it there? Or there was none of that. I was just,
it was the furthest thing from my mind. And then I didn't even know that email existed until 15 minutes before our call. I'm like, oh, that's probably what just happened. So
yeah. So it's a lovely feel to achieve. And I guess for me, it's always about maintaining that as much as possible. And the reality is I don't always. I did have an incident last night. Whenever it comes to family, I always have an incident where the power goes out. It's ridiculous. And I'm not meaning electricity. Like, it's just like, oh, Dan, there's that emotional, historic pull that just drags my power out. But I do love that feeling of feeling just okay in every moment. And that's what I wish for everyone, really, is to be able to achieve that.
And I think people in time will get there. Not everyone's going to get there. Some are going to get there a lot faster than others. I mean, a few years ago, more than a few years ago, I would have gotten really mad getting cut off on the road. And there would have been all kinds of judgment about how reckless that person is, and do they know I've got family in the car, and like all this whatever story I've made up, maybe give them an obscene gesture and yell and honk and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do that anymore, and it's because I changed the way that my outlook was towards the other person. I'm like, well, they're in a real hurry, or like, I wonder what's going on with them. I don't take anything as serious anymore, and I find that I'm often intuitively knowing that something's going to happen before it happens, because I'm in a more calm, more empowered state. I'm like, that guy, something looks a little off, and then Yep, there he was. Okay. And it doesn't get me anymore. It's almost like acknowledgement that I'm in a better place by recognizing it, seeing it happen, and being okay with it. Like, I'm glad I wasn't the next car up, or I'm appreciative for being in the position that I'm at, and let them go
Yep.
off and do their thing.
The thing that
Whatever that
they
thing.
have to focus on. Yep. Yep.
And it took me a long time to get there, but when I did, it was like, this feels way better.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
got to the point one time where I did the obscene gesture and I flashed the lights, and then there was this weird, I don't know, like NASCAR, like racing thing that happened, and he's like waving me over to the side of the road to slow down. I'm like, oh, I'm a lover, not a fighter. This is not gonna go well. I like the look of this, and I don't want it messed up. So I'm like, okay, back on the road. Do your regular kilometers. Like, don't speed. Just let it go away. That was like my big wake up on that. So yeah, it doesn't. The escalation doesn't help anything. That short-sighted, I want to get confrontational, I want to blame and whatever, cast aspersions on the other person. It doesn't get you anywhere. It just gets more of that.
Yeah, because we attract what we have going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, there we go. Another really fun conversation. Thanks, Ian.
Thank
Glad
you.
we got
That
the
was not
timing
where I expected that to
sorted.
go.